Warning: this episode contains details that some listeners may find disturbing. February 13th, 1891. It's 2 a.m. A police constable, Ernest Thompson, is walking his beat, lantern swinging, boots clicking on the stone. He nears a railway arch that he passed about 30 minutes prior. This time, he hears footsteps moving quickly away from him in the dark. He shines his light under the arch, and there he sees a woman on the ground in a pool of blood, her throat cut. But she is alive, barely. And P.C. Thompson, following the protocol drilled into him by the Ripper murders of 1888, knows he cannot leave her to chase the man running into the night. He blows his whistle, he stays, he watches her die. Her name was Frances Coles. She was 31 years old, and she may or may not have been the last woman ever killed by Jack the Ripper. This is a study of strange. Welcome back to the show. I am Michael, your host. I have a special guest today, Rebecca Stevens. How you doing, Rebecca?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me on.
So Rebecca's husband, Norm, was on my very first episode. So and I've been trying to think of an episode for you for a while. So I'm glad you responded to me when I asked questions about Jack the Ripper. So Rebecca, I met as an actor, but you're now tell me again, you're a therapist. But,
yes. So I'm an associate marriage and family therapist, and I work mostly with prenatal and postnatal women and couples.
Fantastic. When I asked, hey, do I have any friends that know about Jack the Ripper that may want to be on the show, you responded with some interesting comments that I totally agree with. And I was like, oh, Rebecca's going to be great on this episode. I am going to ask you about some of those thoughts, but I want to wait until I get through. I want to give sort of a synopsis of Jack the Ripper just for the few people out there that may not know the whole story. Before I say that, though, Rebecca, I will comment, when I first started this podcast, people, I think almost everybody was like, oh, so you'll cover Jack the Ripper. And I was like, no, because everybody covers Jack the Ripper. So there's nothing I can really add, but I couldn't help myself. And I wanted to focus on potential other victims of Jack the Ripper because they don't really get their story told often. And when they do, it's always in a sensational, hey, maybe Jack the Ripper killed more people. And they focus on the potential killer and not so much the victims. And so I thought it would be interesting to look at some of those women outside of the canonical five, as it's called, which are the victims that everybody says Jack the Ripper killed. So today we're asking, did Jack the Ripper kill more than 5 women? And yeah, so what do you think, Rebecca? You're on the hot seat now.
Dun, dun, dun. If I just say no, then do we stop the podcast?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, hey, I've got other stuff I can do, so it's fine.
Yeah, I think he totally did.
Yeah. It's always been odd to me that these murders started and they ended, I think it's only 3 months or so that the whole Jack the Ripper saga happened, and then it just ends. Yeah. And there are theories behind it. Some people suspect that it's the killer himself, was locked up in an asylum. There's all these various theories that I won't go into today, but it still seems weird. It seems weird that they just started and they just abruptly ended. So I do think there's a possibility. Mm-hmm. All right. I'm going to give a little background to Jack the Ripper. In the autumn of 1888, someone began brutally murdering women in the East End of London, specifically in and around Whitechapel, some of the most overcrowded, impoverished, and crime-ridden streets in the world at the time. The victims were women who worked as sex workers, who slept in lodging houses when they could afford the few pennies it took to pay for a bed, and who wandered the streets at night when they couldn't. The killer's method was consistent. He approached these women in the dark, cut their throats from left to right with remarkable speed and skill, and then mutilated their bodies, focusing on the abdomen, removing organs with what many contemporary doctors described as surgical level and anatomical knowledge. That's hard to say. He was never caught, he was never conclusively identified, and the name he became known by, Jack the Ripper, is undoubtedly the most famous serial killer in history. 5 murders are now generally accepted as his doing: Mary Nichols in August of 1888, Annie Chapman in September, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes on the same night in September, and Mary Kelly in November. Mary Kelly's murder was the most savage at all because it was indoors where she lived, where he had time and privacy. And I don't know if you've ever seen the crime scene photograph of that, Rebecca, but it literally haunts me. Like, it's awful.
No, I heard it described, and then I was like, I don't need that picture. I mean,
No.
I put one in my head, and that's enough.
So after Mary Kelly's killings, as far as we know, all the murders stopped. But did they? Because the official Whitechapel murders investigation remained open until 1892 and encompassed 11 deaths, not 5. And that is where our story will start. So now I want to ask you, Rebecca, you had some general sort of comments and feelings about Jack the Ripper and some things that you would like to say, or at least I don't know if you want to say. I want you to say them, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yes. Well, I mean, Jack, terrible guy. Gotta love him, gotta hate him. Mostly hate him. But I feel like there's so much talk about him that they don't talk about the women as much. And, when I did my deep dive a while ago into the women, like, they were all, like, it was such sad stories of, like, women that had been kicked out by their husbands, or they had left their families, or their husbands had died, and they really were just trying to survive. And they were all sex workers, but they didn't have any choice. And a lot of them were hoping that, like, oh, I'll get better. But what also was going on for all of them is they were all alcoholics.
Yes.
They all had a drinking problem. So I know that one of the victims, she went out. She didn't have money for a bed, so she went out to make her money and be a sex worker. And then her friend saw her, and then she was drunk. She had made the money, and then she spent it on alcohol, and then she got murdered. So I think that we have to take a moment and be like, yeah, okay, Jack the Ripper. I mean, not fascinating. He's a terrible person. Like, I've got my own theories of who he is. But these women had a whole life, and they had families. And even I think that some of them were identified, their fathers came to find them or identify their bodies. Like, it's heartbreaking. And so I kind of just, I'm like, if Jack didn't have the balls to come forward, then, like, F him. Let's talk about these women. Like, they matter.
They do. And honestly, part of the most interesting aspect of this story, just historically speaking, is how awful, like, the lower class of London was at the time. Like, I would rather live in the Middle Ages than London in the 1880s and have no money. Like, it was horrendously bad. It was super violent. So not only do you have these murders going on, and remember, there's 11 just within Whitechapel in like a few years that they're investigating. Not all Jack the Ripper, but they're called the Whitechapel murders. But there's robbery, there's assault, like aggression and violence against women was just common. It was everyday practice in these places in Whitechapel, especially. And yeah, a lot of the victims, if not all of them, were alcoholics. It made them perfect targets, but also they were so desperate. Even when they knew, like, there's a potential serial killer out there, they would still go out on the streets at night because they had to. Like, they had no way to pay for a bed if they didn't. So they had to do it. Like, it's really, really terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But you're right about, like, the living conditions. Like, like, it sounds terrible. And then you've got, like, little shithead orphans being like, please, sir, can I have some more, sir? And you're like, no, you can't have any more. I don't have enough.
Exactly.
Like,
get away from me. Yes.
Like, the smells, like, it was not great. But then, also these women being sex workers, people didn't care that they died. Like, they were like, well, they looked down on them. And it's like, oh my gosh, these were mothers and daughters. Like, they were trying so hard to survive at a time that was, like, unsurvivable. And then, like, having Jack the Ripper come around, like, what are you going to do?
It's pretty terrible. I will give a little bit of credit of how, and it was probably due to the press, because Jack the Ripper became famous because the press really focused on it because it was selling. It could make great headlines and they could sell papers. And I'm not sure if the police would have paid as much attention to the case if it wasn't getting that sort of press. But I will say they did investigate this as best they could at the time, because they did not have means or knowledge or the scientific background or technical background to solve cases like this like they would today.
No, but I mean, you also have to think, like, how hard were they able to try? Like, obviously they didn't have DNA, like, testing. But I mean, if you look at like crime scene photos from like the early 80s, there's like cops with like long cigarettes just being like, oh, we got murdered here. Like, and like
Yeah.
walking through blood.
Yeah.
Like it took a long time for us to kind of like get our shit together and be like, maybe we shouldn't touch the crime scene. And it still happens today where it gets messed up. But like,
Yeah.
I can only imagine how like it was just like, there's no way they would have gotten much evidence at all because they didn't know to like preserve the crime scene.
Absolutely. And they did learn. It's one of the things that Jack the Ripper actually had an influence on crime scene science, because they didn't always photograph crime scenes, and they started to with Mary Kelly on this. Sometimes people say she's the first crime scene photo. She's not. Like her, they did use it before that in crime scenes, just not often. And so they started doing it with murders after her. And also the police learned to not mess up the crime scene before other investigators showed up, because at the beginning of this they would touch everything, then move stuff, and by the end they were like, oh wait, let's wait till more people are here before I do anything. So Jack the Ripper had honestly kind of a positive influence on crime scene investigation in a weird way.
Thank you, Jack off.
That's the title of the episode. All right. So I'm going to dive into some of these potential other victims, and I'm going to start with a woman named Martha Tabram. And she was murdered on August 7th, 1888. So this is before the canonical five. Martha Tabram, a.k.a. Martha Turner, was found in the early hours of a Tuesday morning on the first floor landing of a building called George Yard Buildings in one of the darkest, most dangerous alleyways of Whitechapel. Dark also meant private for sex workers, which is why she was back there. She was found with 39 stab wounds from her throat to her abdomen. Martha had lived a hard life, like we've been talking about. She was born in 1849. She married a man named Henry Tabram in 1869. The marriage fell apart because of her heavy drinking. Henry eventually reduced his alimony, or I think the British were calling it at the time, maintenance. So her maintenance fee from her ex-husband was originally 12 shillings a week. He discovered she'd taken up prostitution, so he was like, I'll pay you less, and he paid her less than that. And then he stopped paying her completely because she was living with a dude named William Turner. By 1888, this couple would alternate from rented rooms to lodging houses, and they were also an on-again, off-again couple. And mostly they would fight and break up for a period of time because she drank so much. That was sort of the common issue in this relationship. On the night of August 6th, Martha was drinking with a woman known as Mary Ann Connolly, also known as Pearly Pole was her nickname. Pearly Pole, would later say, it's so like Victorian British. I love it. Pearly Pole would later say that she knew Martha as Emma and not Martha, which is a really interesting detail. And Pearly Pole would give conflicting information throughout this investigation, whether because she couldn't be trusted or because she was a heavy drinker. We will never know why her details were always so all over the place. So that night, Mary Ann Connolly, Pearly Pole, and Martha picked up two soldiers in a pub on Whitechapel High Street. Around midnight, the group split into two couples. Pole went with one of the soldiers and Martha went with another down into George Yard. George Yard is basically an alley. It's that dark, dangerous alley. And a police constable encountered one of the soldiers loitering at the entrance to George Yard around 2 a.m., still waiting for his companion to finish his business inside. The officer thought nothing of it and moved on. And at 1:40 a.m., a couple returned home to George Yard Buildings, but they didn't see Martha at the location her body would later be found. It could be because it was so dark. Like there's no electricity in that building, so it's very dark at night. At 3:30 a.m., a resident of the building, a cab driver, returned home and saw a woman laying on the ground, but didn't consider anything of it because she could have been homeless or drunk, which was very common in Whitechapel. At 4:50 in the morning, a man named John Saunders Reeves came down the stairs of George Yard Buildings and found Martha lying on her back in a pool of blood. The examining doctor on the scene, Dr. Timothy Killeen, made two findings that are somewhat debated today. First is the majority of the 39 wounds had been inflicted with an ordinary penknife, sort of like a pocket knife size knife. But one wound, the considered death wound, was a deep gash to the sternum, which was made by something larger. And he suggested a dagger. And I think later on they started suggesting maybe a bayonet. So remember, she was seen with a soldier. So it sort of connects this idea of the soldier would be the prime suspect. Second thing that Dr. Colleen made was that there was no evidence of recent sexual intercourse. And the police investigation went nowhere very fast. And Pearlie Pohl was brought in on 2 separate lineups to try to identify the soldiers that they were with. And I want you to actually read something, if you don't mind pulling up that email I sent you, Rebecca. So this is a quote from an article in the Sunday People newspaper from August 19th, 1888. And you must do it in an accent. That's a requirement.
Hold on, I have to warm up with, "Hello, Governor. Pearlie Pohl couldn't spot him. Inspector Reed accompanied..." Oh, wait, I want to be so dramatic. Okay. Pearlie Pohl couldn't spot him. Inspector Reed, accompanied by a woman known as Pearlie Pohl, who was in the company of the murdered woman, went to the tower, where she was confronted with every non-commissioned officer and private who had leave of absence at the time of the outrage. Pearlie Pohl was asked, "Can you see either of these men you saw with the woman now dead?" Pearlie Pohl placed her arm akimbo, glanced at the men with the air of an inspecting officer, and shook her head. Pearlie Pohl exclaimed with a good deal of feminine emphasis, "He ain't here."
Oh, I love it. You went into a little bit Southern there at the end, but that was perfect.
It had to be feminine. What do you
Yeah. I do love, one of the reasons I pulled this quote is it's the importance of she couldn't identify the soldiers that were with them. But I just loved the line with a good deal of feminine emphasis. He ain't here. Yeah. I just love
also,
that.
her arms akimbo. It's like
her arms akimbo. Yep. I don't know. I think it could be like,
oh yeah, like so like
I don't know.
She's an emoji. That's fine.
So I'm going to break down each victim I talk about today, and sort of the case of why it could be Jack the Ripper, and then the case against Jack the Ripper. So what could be Jack the Ripper about this case is Inspector Walter Dew, who worked on all the Jack the Ripper cases, and this one wrote in his memoirs that he had no doubt this murder was the work of the Ripper because the similarities were hard to ignore. A female street worker killed in the dark in Whitechapel or near Whitechapel with wounds concentrated on the throat and lower abdomen, the same areas the Ripper would obsessively target in subsequent killings. And the body was found lying on her back with her skirts raised, also similar to Ripper victims. Additionally, there was no sign of sexual intercourse, which it's hard to confirm with the Ripper victims, but a lot of people claim that there was no sexual intercourse with the Ripper canonical 5. So that might line up. And some Ripper scholars and many Reddit users, I wrote that because Reddit users think they're experts, so I do that, have argued that Martha Tabram fits naturally into the sequence of the murders and that she may represent the Ripper's very first kill before he refined his methods of sort of throat cutting and then evisceration. So the case against the Ripper is that the method is different. As much as we're like, hey, there's some similarities, it is different. And MO is really integral in sort of serial killer science and psychology and trying to catch them. And the 39 stab wounds with a penknife is not how Jack the Ripper would end up killing people. And it also showed basically almost like a different emotional motivation. Some people have argued that it shows like rage, like it could have been somebody that was turned away, like, oh, no, I'm not going to have sex with you. And they could have just been mad and like, yeah, and gone for it. And it's just very different in that approach than what the Ripper would do. Do you have any thoughts, Rebecca?
I do, because I could definitely, well, first of all, soldiers, thank you for your service. I want to put that out there. But I feel like this could be the beginning because, you know, from a therapist's standpoint, he could have been holding on to all this rage and it came out for the first time with her. And then he just learned to do it better, you know? So I think that there is a chance that he might have done this murder, especially when they didn't find it. But I mean, I'm also leaning towards the soldier. But if there was no soldier, I mean, if they couldn't capture him, then I think there is a really good chance.
Yeah, I do too. And it's the reason I picked this one, because there is a victim or two that happened right before this that some people claim could be the beginning of the Ripper. And to me, they just weren't the same. Like one of them to me seems like a robbery. And the reason this stood out to me is because there was this focus on the throat and the abdomen. And, you know, you got to start somewhere. It's kind of weird to say, but like, he's got to start and learn how he's going to do these things.
I thought you meant you had to start somewhere on a body.
No, like, no. No, I just meant like a serial killer. Yeah. A serial killer would work up into some sort of method. I will say the soldier thing is one of the things I think could be against this being Jack the Ripper, though, because the soldier had his friend. Mm-hmm. And I do think a lot of the what do you call those people that profilers a lot of the profilers that have studied Jack the Ripper have claimed that he would work solo. This was like a very personal event and experience. So you wouldn't do that with like a buddy. You wouldn't be like, hey, hang out at the end of the alley and wait for me. So that to me kind of is like, if it was the soldier, because I do think it could have been the soldier, that points away from Jack the Ripper in my mind.
Yeah, well, I don't think it was the soldier either, because I think the soldier wanted to get laid. So like, I feel like he'd been like, well, I'm going to have sex with her and then maybe kill her, if those are your options. But I mean, but then did he get scared away? Like what is that story? Or did Martha get turned off by him? Like, and the thing is I know that Mikey, you just said like, it's weird to like talk about this 100 years later, but like these names need to be said. Like,
yes,
they're up, you know, heaven or hell. Well, Jack the Ripper's definitely in hell. But like these names need to be remembered. So I think it's okay that we are talking about it.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's important to share these things. Mm-hmm. So Martha Tabram, unfortunately, shares a lot of similarities with all the other Ripper victims and the other ladies that we're going to talk about today, which is that it was tough out there, man. They were so desperate, and it was so hard. And we're going to talk now about Alice McKenzie, who was murdered on July 17th, 1889. So this is 8 months after Mary Kelly, the last canonical victim of Jack the Ripper. Police presence had intensified in Whitechapel, but everybody was still completely terrified almost a year later. And at 12:50 in the morning on July 17th, 1889, police constable Walter Andrews found a woman's body in Castle Alley just off of Whitechapel High Street. She was laying near a lamppost. Her skirt had been pulled up. There was blood across her thigh and abdomen coming from a wound that ran in a zigzag pattern from below her left breast to her navel, and her throat had been cut. Her name was Alice McKenzie. I already said that. She was about 40 years old and was known in the neighborhood as Clay Pipe Alice. I love this, on account that she was always smoking a clay pipe. And a clay pipe was found on her body. So it was definitely her.
Wait, so then if we go back to Pearly Pole, what was she smoking then?
Oh, yeah. It's these questions that are important, Rebecca.
These nicknames. I need to know where these nicknames come from.
I just love it. They're so British. So she was a sex worker, just to confirm that is the other common feature here. She had been living for several years with a man named John McCormick, who came forward to identify the body. He was very upset with her death, very sincerely upset. He also mentioned that she had gone out the previous evening after a slight quarrel between them, and that she had to, his knowledge, had never been out this late previously. And he was not seriously considered a suspect. I want to say that because people will naturally be like, this John McCormick fella, who's he? But he was not seriously considered. I think there were plenty of things that proved he was not the killer. He also said that they fought. The reason they fought is because she was drinking heavily, and he's been trying to get her to cut down on her drinking. So what happened next sort of showed that there was a bit of a fracture in Scotland Yard, the investigators, because people believed different things. The police commissioner, James Monroe, came to the scene himself. He examined the body, and later that day he sent a report stating that he was personally inclined to believe that this was Jack the Ripper. Dr. Thomas Bond, who had examined Mary Kelly's remains back in November, also examined Alice McKenzie. And he agreed with Monroe that this was Jack the Ripper. But Dr. George Bagster Phillips, a police surgeon who had also been present for some of the murders in 1888, examined the body and reached the complete opposite conclusion. He said the wounds were not severe enough and that the mutilation was superficial compared to previous victims. And Robert Anderson, who was head of CID, who he suspected, I think it was Kosminski, one of the famous suspects in Jack the Ripper. He thought Kosminski was the killer, and Kosminski was locked up at this point. So he's like, it's not Jack the Ripper because it's that guy. I know who Jack the Ripper is, it's not him. So he didn't believe it was Jack the Ripper either. And so the case for this being Jack the Ripper is that the throat was cut, abdomen was attacked, body found outdoors at night in these sort of neighborhoods that he was a frequent user of, and found in the same position as some of the other victims. And then, of course, some of the high-ranking investigators believed that it was Jack the Ripper. The case against is that this fairly superficial zigzag pattern slash was just not like the Ripper at all. The Ripper would focus on the abdomen and specifically like reproductive organs, where this did not. It did not do that kind of stuff. And a lot of people have talked about how serial killers progress. Like you see that with the Ripper case, like each victim kind of gets a little worse, and you have this climax with Mary Kelly, whereas this almost like goes back, this retreats in sort of style and substance. So that is kind of a knock against the Ripper. And there's also the timeline, because Mary Kelly was killed in November and then it stopped, and here it is almost a year later. So why so much time? Why was there this big gap when he was so frequent in 1888?
Well, it almost sounds like it could be a copycat killer, like someone that got off by learning about Jack the Ripper and seeing it and doing it himself. And I'm also wondering, like, it also sounds like everyone investigating it was a little bit lazy, that they were like, I'm tired, guys. What month was it again?
Oh, this is in August? No, July 17th, 1889.
Right. So, yeah. Okay, so there's no 4th of July there. But, like, it's the summer. They're like, oh, I don't want it. We'll just say it's Jack the Ripper because we already have that, that file open. So we'll just investigate that way. Like, I don't know. I'm getting that sense from these men that they're late.
I think that is a very astute observation, because I get that feeling with a lot of, even more outside of victims that we're not even going to talk about today. It does seem like people just want to like lump them. And when I say people, I mean investigators at the time, but also modern investigators that go back and read about this stuff. It does seem like it's Jack the Ripper because it's a fascinating story to say that. But also with investigators, it is a bit of a lazy thing, and they want to have a nice little box to put these things in to explain them, instead of dealing with the hard fact of like, no, there could be multiple murderers out there.
Right. But then that's terrifying. Like, not only is it one person, what if there's another person? And it's like, I mean, everyone would have their clay pipes. And what did she smoke again? Yeah,
it's clay pipe. Yeah.
Everyone would be smoking their clay pipe and just worried.
All right. Well, that leads us, I don't know how that transitioned us from a clay pipe to the next victim, but we're going to do that. On February 13th, 1891, a woman named Frances Coles was murdered. Frances Coles was 31 years old, and like everybody else, she was struggling to live, to support herself, and would often stay in the common lodging houses of Whitechapel. On February 11th, 2 days previous, she met a merchant seaman named James Sadler in the Princess Alice pub. They were old acquaintances. She was a former client of his, or wait, or is he a former client of hers? However, you know what I mean.
Yeah, he's a seaman.
Yeah, hey, there you go. So they spent the night together, and then they spent most of February 12th on a pub crawl, drinking very heavily all day long. And by evening, they started arguing. And according to some versions of the story, Sadler was robbed and beaten by a group of strangers, while Frances just apparently stood and watched.
Okay, wait, time out. I think I saw this on the episode of The Valley or The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. This sounds like an episode in a reality show.
Yes. That is what makes this. I mean, it shows human nature doesn't change, right? Like it does not change. These kind of things
but it does not change.
Exactly. So these kind of things have always happened. So he was bleeding and humiliated and very mad with Francis for probably just standing there, maybe even yelling at him. I could see her like a reality show being like, why are you getting beat up? Stop.
Flipping tables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they fought and they parted ways. Frances had no money for a bed that night, so she was wandering the streets, and at 1:45 in the morning on the 13th of February, she ran into another street worker named Ellen Kalana on Commercial Street. And while they're standing together, a man described as wearing a cheese cutter hat, which is like the Newsies hat. Kind of, I had to look it up because I wasn't sure.
The Wisconsin like cheese head.
Yep, the cheese head.
Yeah,
I'm going to change this. It was a gentleman in Victorian London wearing a cheese head hat. No, I would love that. It would be amazing. But no, it's like a newsy hat. And he approached the women and he propositioned Kalana, but she was like, nah, not right now. So he punched her in the face. And
I'm sorry, that's terrible.
Yeah. But it is.
I didn't see that one coming.
No one would. It's pretty crazy. And so he punched her in the face. He turned to Frances and was like, hey, baby, what about you? And Frances was like, yeah, all right.
What?
And
I'm sorry. You just punched my friend in the face. Yeah, sure. You seem like a nice guy.
Well, here's why I think this is so important, because it just stresses again this desperation. It's like she needs money. She has nowhere to stay that night. So it's like, well, hey, if I can get some pence from this dude and pay for a bed, there we go. So yeah, it's terrifying.
Like, where's the loyalty? Where's the fucking loyalty to your buddy? Like, she needs a new nose. What are you gonna do about that?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know. Go on, because I assume the friend lives and this is okay. So okay, go on.
That actually is a good point, because the friend, as far as I know, does live. So 25 minutes later, PC Ernest Thompson heard footsteps moving away from him under the Swallow Gardens railway arch on Chambers Street.
Swallow?
Yeah, I was about to.
I'm sorry, you can edit that out, but
no, we're gonna keep that in, Rebecca. Swallow Gardens. Yep. So he shone his lantern into this dark corner where he heard these footsteps running away. Although I guess I should say a torch. I think the British people call it a torch. He shone his torch into the dark corner. And Frances Coles was on the ground, her throat cut ear to ear, bleeding out. And then here's the craziest part of this. She was still alive. Oh. So he blows his like police whistle to notify other police to come. And unfortunately, by the time other officers arrived, she had passed away.
Yeah. But where was he with like, oh, let me take my jacket off and make a tourniquet around your neck and like. Sorry.
No, I actually don't know those details. I don't know. Maybe he did try to save her in some fashion. Okay. I actually don't know.
Blowing your whistle and getting other men isn't going to help.
But Rebecca, it's the 1880s.
I know.
Men are the only way to solve anything. You've got to have men around.
I'm sorry. That was misspoke.
Yes. I'm so sorry, everybody. I won't have Rebecca on again.
I'm using my feminine. What's my feminine?
Yep.
I'm using my feminine emphasis.
So the police turned immediately after they started investigating this. They turned their sights to Thomas Sadler, the man that she had lived or had been with the night before, which I would have done too, of course. And he was found the next morning in a pub. He was arrested and charged. And then there was this intense period where it seemed like everybody in London thought that he was Jack the Ripper. And that is because all the local papers were like, we caught Jack. Like they all had headlines like, we caught Jack the Ripper. This is it. And he was almost lynched because of this. But the problem is that his case fell apart. Like he most likely is not Jack the Ripper. And he had many reasons why he couldn't have been. One of them was that he actually had proof that he had been robbed. He didn't get injured because he and Frances fought. He literally was robbed. He also had a scalp wound that corroborated a story of his that he had a violent altercation at the docks he worked at during, I think, when she was supposedly alone. So they were separated. He didn't stay with her that night.
He did his ass kicked twice that night?
You know what? That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
I don't think he did. That poor man.
Poor guy. He also had been at sea on a ship during some of the Jack the Ripper murders, so he could not have been Jack the Ripper.
Okay. Yeah. I thought he was at sea during the night, and I was like, what do these people do at night?
No. And he also had a knife on him. And so they thought, and because it had some marks on it that they thought were dried blood, it turned out to be rust. And also it was too dull to actually like cut, cut a person's throat, I should say. So for all those reasons, he was rolled out as the suspect. And it's interesting because I've seen every documentary about Jack the Ripper. Like, I'm fascinated with it. I've read a lot of books, and I do see his name still come up as a potential suspect as Jack the Ripper. But it's like, guys, I don't think so. There's too many things.
He was drinking his wounds. Again, he got his ass handed to him twice in one night.
Twice.
Like that guy is not getting revenge that night.
No. So the case for Jack the Ripper is that, again, circumstances: outdoor, nighttime, Whitechapel, sex worker, desperate woman, throat cut. I will say, for people that are like, oh, but there was no like abdominal craziness like Jack the Ripper, well, the constable was coming by. He heard footsteps going away, so he was interrupted. So that's one reason to think of like, hey, it could have been him because the throat was cut.
Yeah.
So it could have been a Ripper connection there. However, the case against Ripper is that the police surgeon, Dr. Baxter Phillips, examined the body and concluded that the nature of the wound and the posture of the body did not connect to any previous victim in the series of Ripper victims. And also in the case of Elizabeth Stride, who was the victim that he killed, and then he was interrupted, and Jack the Ripper ran off and killed Catherine Eddowes.
Yeah.
He sought out somebody else. He wasn't able to fulfill his fantasy or whatever he's trying to do. So he had to continue. He had to do it that night, whereas that didn't happen in this case.
Yeah.
So that kind of points against Jack the Ripper. If you're keeping points here, there's not a point for that.
Jack is losing.
Jack is losing. There's also the guy that Elena Kalana saw, like, that assaulted her and then left with Francis. That to me is like the most likely suspect. And I don't think if you're this massive serial killer like Jack the Ripper, I don't think you're going to be such an obvious like suspect by punching a lady and then grabbing another one to go kill. Like, it just seems a little too on the nose because the woman that you punched saw you. So I don't know. That to me just doesn't seem right.
Yeah. And his fist saw her nose. So like, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I wouldn't think so. It seems, I mean, obviously this guy is a shithead, doesn't respect women, but yeah, I don't. And also the cheese hat, I feel like, who's wearing Swiss cheese on their head? No. I feel like Jack the Ripper has always been known to have like Abraham Lincoln hat. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought he had
the top hat.
Top hat. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the way they depict him, but no one knows because no one knows who Jack the Ripper is. So that's just kind of a great artistic license to take.
Well, it's worked because that's what I think.
It does. No, I do too. So here, those are all the women I was going to talk about. I wasn't going to go into more. Remember, there's 11 in the Whitechapel murders themselves. There's also other victims that people that researched Jack the Ripper brought up. There's people that talk about killings in America and Scotland, and there's all these sensational stories that I think mostly come about because it helps sell books and TV shows and stuff. But the reason I liked these three is because they were there at the time, the right circumstances, the same kind of women in the same desperate situations. And so to me, there is a chance that the same killer killed these women. I don't know if I really believe it was him, but I do think there's a chance. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if one day we were able to get DNA evidence and blah, 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 and connect the dots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm leaning mostly towards the first one, Martha.
Yeah.
Only because I do have my belief on who he is also, but like I'm opening up my mind to other people. But I feel like Martha maybe, but it's also just like, it was such a short time that he was a serial killer. So it would make sense that it might have been longer if there was more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because it's also like fascinating that nobody came forward, and the people that like, they say the murders ended because they they were locked up, and nobody ever really confessed it. So I don't know. It's just, it seems like there could have definitely been more, and the person that did it died before they could ever like confess or whatever. Yeah. Obviously they were unstable. But I mean, I'm definitely leaning towards Martha as maybe like
I do.
being.
Yeah. I think out of the three of them that I shared today, Martha to me is the most likely because it shows a bit of a progression in how he killed women. And, sort of, again, it sort of climaxes in the Mary Kelly killing.
Mhm.
You mentioned no one really sort of saw things and no one had admitted to anything and blah, blah, blah. I actually want you to read something else. So on
Oh,
that same email, yeah. This is for there's a case called the Pinchin, is it Pinchin? I have to pull up my notes here. I'm going to say it wrong. Yeah, Pinchin Street Torso. So this is one of the famous murders. It was probably part of another series of murders that I want to cover on my show called the Tim's Torso Murders. But there was a woman it was basically just like part of a body found underneath this archway. And it was on September 10th, 1889. So it's almost a year after the Jack the Ripper cases. And I gave you a quote from a newspaper only because there were so many people that thought they saw Jack the Ripper, or like so many. And you can look in old newspapers and people are like, it's that guy. He's a fat guy and I don't like him. And he's Jack the Ripper because he doesn't like women. Like there's a ton of stuff like that. A lot of it anti-Semitic. And it's even where like a lot of our famous suspects for today actually started with anti-Semitism back then. And we've just sort of lost touch with that over the years. Like Kosminski's one of them. He's one of the famous suspects.
yeah.
Rightly or wrongly, like maybe he really was Jack the Ripper, I'm not saying. But the reason they started targeting people like him is because of Jews. Like they were like, oh, it's got to be a Jew. And there's even police saying that in newspapers of like, this is obviously one of these immigrant Jews. And
Wow.
it's just so soaked in like racism. But so a lot of witnesses talk about that. They'll pick out people who are obviously Jewish as a potential like suspect. Anyway, long story short is I want you to read this story after the Pinchin Street torso was found from the newspaper, the Sunday People, which this article is from September 22nd, 1889.
Okay. I have to warm up. Hello. Hello, Governor. The supposed assassin lived with a friend of Dr. Forbes Winslow, and this gentleman himself told the doctor that he had noticed the man's strange behavior. He would at times sit down and write 50 or 60 sheets of manuscript about low women, for whom he professed to have a great hatred. Shortly before the body was found in Pinchin Street last week, the man disappeared, leaving behind him the articles already mentioned, together with the manuscript, which the doctor said was in exactly the same handwriting as Jack the Ripper letters.
Yeah.
Feminine emphasis.
Feminine emphasis. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know. I just like that. I like that quote from that newspaper article.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were a lot of people being like, I know who Jack the Ripper is.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I have to ask you now, who do you think Jack the Ripper is? Because you have a theory. I want to know.
I think it's Montague John Druitt.
Druitt?
Druitt.
I think it's Druitt.
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 Only because mental illness ran in his family. His mother had to be locked up when he was young. So that could start as a therapist. That starts with abandonment issues. That could also start with a hatred of women because she's not there. His father was a surgeon. So there's also the chance that he watched from his father and learned how to take out body parts. And then I think he committed suicide shortly afterwards. So that's why that was my and also he was kind of handsome.
Yeah.
Not to be creepy, but he's kind of, he had that butt chin. Who doesn't like a good butt chin? And I feel like he could easily have charmed women a little bit more, the handsome serial killers that now I can't remember his name.
Ted Bundy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Ted Bundy, who was attractive, and people overlooked that. So yeah, that's my theory. I don't know. What's your theory?
I don't have one. I've been following this for so long, and I love reading about them, and even researching just this episode where I was focusing on these victims, and I'm just reading about these women and the stories about them and watching videos about them. And I wasn't paying attention to theories about who Jack the Ripper is, but then I would find myself being like, oh, here's a tab for suspects. And I would go and click on that and go through them again. But I don't know. I've always floated around the Kosminski guy I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
Druid. Those are two of like the big ones that always come up. But yeah, I don't know. I always kind of bounce around. I don't know if you ever saw this, but there's a documentary for television. It was like a one-part documentary. Maybe they made two parts, but it was about the author whose name I'm now blanking on, who writes these like crime novels, and she believes it is I can't
Yes.
remember his name.
Hold on.
Walter Sickert. She believes Walter Sickert is the Jack the Ripper, and he's a very famous artist. I don't believe he's Jack the Ripper at all, but I loved that documentary so
Mm.
much, and I found it fascinating. But to me, it's a lot of confirmation bias. She really believes it's him, so I feel like she's only seeing what kind of fits that. But it's still a fascinating theory that I just love to sort
Yeah.
of read about. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't
Well,
know. I don't know.
Michael, I have some good news. I have Jack the Ripper with me right here. Come on out. Come on out, Jack.
This is big. This is big for the show, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
Or
We solved it.
we solved it. But I also think it'd be like interesting if like you ever went to a psychic or like a past lives person and they're like, oh, by the way, you were Jack the Ripper. And it'd be like, huh? Wow.
Oh, jeez.
No
What
wonder
was
you're
going
so
on with me?
fascinated. Michael, it was you the whole time. Jack the Ripper was inside
Wow.
you the whole time.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. So, well, that being said, I still feel like we didn't talk about the victims enough, Rebecca. I feel like you're just never going to succeed in that, I guess. It's
No,
like,
but I feel like so they have a musical right now about Henry VIII's wives called The Six, and it's all about them. So we need a musical called The Five,
yeah.
some others, and then they could just like sing and dance and drink and sex work and then get murdered. But at least it would bring their names out into like popular culture.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. There should be a musical. And also, I think that sort of takes, it's nice to take a kind of light-hearted approach to these older, very nasty murders because it's important to share the stories, but we also have to be able to digest it. So turning it into a musical I think it's a great idea. And then we can also make fun of Jack the Ripper, that awful douchebag. So,
of course. And the reason why he didn't have sex with any of the women is because his penis didn't work and it was really tiny.
Which is actually a very good theory, by the way. That is a very valid theory, I think. I mean, in terms of like, obviously there's a lot of hatred for women, not just because of the killings themselves, but also the way he would target the reproductive organs. Like that to me is so specific.
Yeah. I mean, because that is the ultimate. I mean, you're murdering them, but then you're really like disrespecting them by taking away like the one thing that makes women different than men. The one thing that we have that you guys should not touch. Get your hands off of there.
Yeah, and I only read about this researching this episode, but apparently there's a term, I should have written it down because now I don't remember, for sexual gratification for like cutting into something. And so some people have theorized like because we think he may not have had sex with these women, that there was still sexual gratification that came across in the murders themselves from the act of it. So, it is. It's not pretty. It's not pretty.
It's not pretty, Governor.
It's not pretty. Well, thank you for trying to do some accents. I didn't get to do terrible accents myself on this episode.
Wait, mine were terrible? I thought.
No, I'm saying mine would have been terrible. Yours were fantastic.
I had feminine essences. Feminine sauce.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, Rebecca. I don't want to take up too much else of your time. I do want to share one quick story about you, though, if I can.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So Rebecca lives in my neighborhood. And one day, you may not even remember this, but to me, it's so funny. But I didn't have my glasses on and you were walking by sort of past my backyard and you said like, hey, Michael, or whatever. I heard my name and I look out and I asked like, who is that or what? Like, I obviously didn't know who you were. And I was like, who is that? And you said, Rebecca, your friend.
It wasn't that long ago, by the way. I feel like that was in like the last year, maybe.
Probably.
Yeah, and I was walking one of my kids to school, and I just wanted some attention. I was taking care of two little kids. I just wanted someone to notice me, to see me for who I am. And then when I saw you, I was like, "Yay!" And then when you're like, "Who?" and I was like, "God damn it, I'm your friend."
And it's really sad because I don't have the worst eyes but you were not far. It's not like you were far away, but I still couldn't figure out who you were right away. So I'm so I'm so sorry.
I think it's funny. I forgot about it till now. So now
Yeah.
I remember
No,
it.
I love it. I think about it and I giggle. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Rebecca. I love your point of views on this. And I was glad I had somebody to join me on this story of Jack the Ripper, because this would not have been a fun one to do by myself. Yeah. Do you want people to find you? Is there anything you want to like promote?
Yeah, they can follow me on TikTok or Instagram at Hot Pants World. If they're interested in therapy, they can find me at ourlifeafterbirth.com, or they can email me at rebecca@ourlifeafterbirth.com. So comedy or therapy, I do both separately.
Do it. It's perfect. I hope you get some sort of client from or patient. Would you call them patients? Patients? Is that what you call them? Clients? Okay. Yeah, I hope you get a client from a Jack the Ripper podcast. That would be amazing.
Be awesome.
You never know. You never know. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Rebecca. I will talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to A Study of Strange. If you have any other of the potential victims of Jack the Ripper that you would like to hear me talk about, send me an email at astudyofstrange@gmail.com. Additionally, if you have experienced something paranormal, something frightening, an interesting story that deals with, strange, scary things, email me as well, astudyofstrange@gmail.com. I am starting to compile some ideas for a Halloween episode later this year where you might be able to be on the show. Thank you again for listening, and good night.